Hey, happy Frowny Face Friday, everyone. I just wanted to come on kind of an unplanned Facebook Live. And we saw a couple of posts where moms were having some frustration. First couple of days of school or first day of school started off kind of good and then went rocky from there. And, if I could address just to help a little bit based on our experience, and I would welcome anybody else's comments and participation, especially if you're a seasoned homeschool mom who's been in the game for a while. The first day of school or the first week of school or developing new patterns, they're not easy, and it's a bit of a challenge for all of us. And even though we love to celebrate the wins on the Moms of Master books, what I would encourage everybody is to know that just because there are wins, we also have struggles and frustrations. Even with our homeschool, we have students of all different ranges and capabilities, and it's really easy to get discouraged. And I would just encourage you, you're not alone. It's pretty common that our students are going to have good days, they're going to have bad days, we're going to have wins and losses and that type of thing. So I would encourage you there. A couple of tips that I would offer to you if you're struggling or you have a student that's struggling to get motivated, or maybe some challenges that they're giving you. Especially we see this with early learning, right at the beginning stages, where any child up to like the age of 11, where there's so much going on in the development process is happening. And so I would just encourage you to know that in those ages, so much is happening as far as developmentally. And if your student is struggling, up to age 11, there's just so many things that are firing off as the child is learning consequences. They're learning to move from very concrete thinking into abstract thinking. So sometimes when they're being asked questions that are much more applied learning, that can be a challenge. You have to give a little bit of room for growth and for the development of the student to allow their brain to grow. Because sometimes we want our third grader, our second grader, to have an adult brain, and their brain isn't there. Their brain is developing, and it's building and creating. And so sometimes that happens. Sometimes there are learning styles. Some students do really well visually. Some students do really well by listening. Some students need to actually be hands-on in doing it. So identifying the learning is important. So, Google child development or early child development, and just get a flavor of what the expectations are for students, and see up to age 11 that they're developing a lot of different abilities, and then even Google learning styles of children or modes of learning, and there you'll see different modes of learning, and you can acquaint yourself a little bit to, well, what is my student? Are they kind of an auditory learner or a visual learner? And maybe some of the things that we're doing, like where we want them to write, and that's very kinesthetic, where they're having hand to pen type motor, hand to brain skills. Maybe that's a struggle, but they would do really well communicating verbally. And so some of those things, I think you can begin to give yourself a little bit of acquaintance with it. Stamina, we talk a lot about stamina, and this is the best thing I think I can give you today, and then we'll have more conversations on this. But imagine even as an adult, but imagine taking children, we take a bunch of third graders and we put them on a treadmill, and we set the treadmill to extreme difficulty, right? So we're 7 on the slope, and we've got the treadmill running, and the kids all fly off. The only way we could do that, if we had 10 kids and we put them on a treadmill where they could each do it, would be we'd have to adjust the pitch and the speed of each of those treadmills. And some kids would have natural ability. They'd be able to have a steep pitch, they'd be able to have a much faster speed, and they'd be able to do it. They just have coordination, they'd have everything that they needed for that. Other kids, you'd have to slow the speed way down, and you'd have to lower the pitch until they develop the ability to do that. And with the kids, especially as we're starting off the new year and getting going, we understand the frustration, but a lot of times it really is allowing the pace of the curriculum and the pace of the learning to match the pace of the student, and adjusting the speed and the tilt to the student's abilities. If I think sometimes too we confuse the issue of it's a self-control issue, the student is just shutting down, they're throwing a tantrum, they need discipline because they can do this. But at the same time, what they can do and what they're capable of expressing or what they're capable of answering, we have to be aware that can be very, there's just a lot of development going on in the brain all the time. So I think you have to be careful. When we start, we have realistic expectations. We're very patient with the process. We step back and then use the curriculum to match your students' needs. And so if there's a page of questions and you notice that your student is overwhelmed by the questions, start with one question. Give a few auditory. Don't make them answer every one. If there's too much copy work, celebrate the win, have them do some copy work, and then pull back. You adjust it. You adapt it. Tailor it. Think of the treadmill, right? It doesn't matter that whatever somebody says that every third grader should be at a 7 on a treadmill with a speed of 4. If your student needs it a little slower, then slow it down for them. Because what's happening is in early child development, all these connections are being made in the brain. The brain is developing really important habits that they'll take forward into their teenage years, into their adult years. If what ends up being created is stress, toxic stress, or anxiety in the process, that connects to the learning process. And we as parents can absolutely tell you that once you have a child that has a anxiety around learning in the first grade, you will carry that forward all the way through to 12th grade, and you will struggle and fight that. And so I think you're a little better off kind of relaxing a little bit and listening to the student. And sometimes in relationships, we force other people around us to get angry or to get loud or whatever in order for us to listen to what they're saying. Sometimes with our students that can happen too. Sometimes we can put them in a spot where the only way we're actually listening to the frustration is when they actually get loud or they shut down or whatever. And so I think it's important to say, explain to me what's happening, and listening or trying to listen with more of our senses than just what the symptoms are. So we don't just want to listen to the fact that they're negative. We want to try to understand, is it because they just they're overwhelmed by it? Maybe they were having more fun playing and now they're not wanting to do it. Or is it that their brain is having to work really hard to make some connections? And if you're like me at all as an adult, it's like starting an exercise program. It's not fun. My body doesn't enjoy it at all. And my brain will do whatever it takes to avoid exercise. It will find pain. It will find distraction. It will find a way to procrastinate it and convince itself and rationalize that maybe tomorrow we can do it. That's what the brain is good at doing. It's good at not exerting a lot of energy without motivation. So just to encourage you that you are not alone in having a student that struggles. And even though you see a lot of happy pictures in the Moms of Master books, and we do have a lot of wins to celebrate in the Moms of Master books, if your child is struggling with starting the process, that's completely normal. And the other thing I would say is life happens too. And we have to be aware that sometimes when there's a new baby or a new job or a move, that can greatly affect a student's behavior or ability. And so I think just being aware that life happens and maybe easing things into it. But I would think in some of the situations I've seen, just to relax a little bit and not get too concerned Definitely asking the Lord for wisdom and insight is so important, but just realizing your student is an individual, created as an individual before God, and as you work to train them, what is the goal, right? It's not that they have all these facts and can impress people, and you know, in third grade they don't need to pass their ACTs. You've got plenty of time to do that. What we're really wanting to do with early childhood development is to create healthy habits and create a very a brain that gets excited about learning, a brain that actually is motivated to learn, and doesn't feel pain around the learning process. And all through my school, I found pain in learning, and I found ways to escape pain. And as an adult, as I've gotten more connected in the learning process, I love to learn new things. It's my passion. It's what I do. But it's definitely taken some time to let go of the anxiety around learning new things and the limitations of that. So we enjoy seeing everybody's feedback in the group, and we want to support you and encourage you. And one book that I might recommend for newer parents is The Pitch and a Fit by Israel and Brooke Wayne. I think it's a good resource on understanding anger as it relates to our children, and sometimes the work that God wants to do with us. Can the anxiety and the pain be undone? Yes, it can be undone. Kathy asked that question. But it's a process, right? So here's how the brain works. The brain is like, imagine a field of tall grass. And so the first time you go through it and you create a pathway, you can see that pathway. Well, the next time you come to the field, if you've got to go to the same place, you're going to take the same path. Eventually, that path becomes a roadway. And so that roadway has created, you know, a neural pathway. It's bathed in chemicals and processes and all of that as the training is done. That roadway is the path of least resistance. Believe it or not, as you're sitting here listening to me and you're thinking, the harder you think, the more calories you're burning. Your body needs to preserve energy. You know, this is why we need to eat breakfast. And a lot of us have healthy or terrible habits when it comes to that, right? But we need to eat breakfast, and we need to have a healthy snack. We need to cut down on sugars, and we need to have foods that are healthy and the calories are healthy, because our brains are actually consuming energy, which is what food is. It's consuming that energy. And so our brain wants to conserve energy. So if it comes to that field and we've worn a well-worn path, now there's a road through it, they're not going to want to you're not going to want to go create another path. So you almost have to like block that path or start taking a different way around until that path grows back in, so to speak. And the well-worn, and you're creating a new well-worn path. So if the student has anxiety, you celebrate a lot of wins. You find the subject that they're really engaged with, and then as they learn in that process, you bathe that new pathway with a lot of praise and reward. Good job. You've really got, you know, I love how excited you get to learn new things. And then suddenly the brain senses reward and feel good chemicals with that pathway. I hope that's making sense. I know I tried to explain a pretty complicated process in there. But the thing that you want to avoid is a lot of anxiety or toxic stress around the learning process. And that's really tough when you have a new baby in the house or a lot of changes. So we moved across country. We left some family behind. We moved across country. We got a new house, a new job, new friendships, new church. We purposely had to pull back and take things a little bit easier than trying to stay focused as hard as we were, because the kids were going through so many changes and so many brain changes that putting anxiety in that aspect when there's already so many areas of life that have anxiety. now that we've been here for a couple of years and we've caught our stride a little bit more in a new area, we're able to now get back into the education side. Not that we ever stopped, but we're able to increase our focus there and do it. And you think of exercise too. When you talk about training, right? I don't enjoy new habits. I don't enjoy doing push-ups and sit-ups or jogging or eating better. I don't. So what do? I have to find ways that I have rewards. I have to have wins and rewards so that it becomes a positive thing and a part of my lifestyle. So I do think you can change anxiety, but I think you have to take a different approach. Early on, when we had our older students, we ascribed to the model that it was all will. Our children were capable of doing anything. With enough discipline, we could force them to have self-control and self-discipline to get through their schoolwork. The goal was really school. It wasn't necessarily the goal was developing good habits to be lifelong learners and good habits for learning. And so as we've aged and we've gone through some of those struggles, we were probably a lot more lax in our approach with the early childhood development. A lot more play is important. I do think it's important not to do a lot of video time. If your kids are watching a lot of TV, a lot of YouTube videos, playing video games, those have different reward circuitry, and the brain gets lazy. And a lazy brain doesn't help when it comes time to learn how to read or write or do those types of things. And so I would definitely limit. We even tend to have certain days that they're allowed, or a certain, half an hour a day, or 3 days a week that they're allowed to play for a certain amount of time. But we don't give unlimited access, and we don't give electronics. There isn't open access to electronics. And this isn't just like my opinion or the church's opinion. There are a lot of people in Silicon Valley who developed platforms like Facebook or gaming systems or stuff like that. They understand the cognitive reward system in the brain when they develop the gaming systems enough that they won't let their own families on those platforms. And Kristen says, don't think like young Randy and Kristen did, 100%. And so if it's dangerous enough that they won't let their own families on the platforms they created, how much more should we be concerned? So even with Facebook, we know that 30 days of Facebook use is extremely addictive, and because of that, it's the reward system that's built into Facebook. They know that it's going to keep you coming back to the point that it almost becomes paralyzing. So if it happens for us as adults, we have to be extremely sensitive to it, that it's happening to our kids as well. But that easy reward, easy hits of dopamine and that type of thing definitely short circuit the doing difficult things. And if you're on Facebook at all, you know that if you're spending a lot of time on Facebook and it's a distraction and there's easy rewards, how hard it is to go and start reading a physical book or paying the bills or whatever. So that's there. Yeah, let's remind ourselves to model health and screen time. I don't always like hearing it, and I know people don't like it when I say it, but we get what we lead. And we have to be sensitive to the fact that sometimes when my kids aren't showing self-control, and I step back and I evaluate, do I show self-control? Do I show self-discipline? Are they modeling my behaviors? Are we setting a good example? How do we understand self-control and character? I think it's real easy to do that outside of the classroom too. That if I tell my son to go set the table for dinner, can he do it? Does he do it? If he's not doing it, then that's something he's fully capable of doing. Or even go brush your teeth, get your pajamas on, get ready for bed. If they're not able to consistently do that, then we probably have to work on some self-control and character issues that will carry forward into the school. But I do think in early learning, there's so many complexities And every student is different. That's why we need the wisdom of the Lord and to be praying for that. So let's see. Yeah, screen time as adults. Jessica, when I spend a lot of time on Facebook, I have more issues with frustration, reaching improperly to my children, reacting improperly to my children. If I see that happening with myself, it's happening with them with video games as well. It really is. Even my older children have said, you know, you need to be really aware of the impact that these games had. And it's easy for us to give them a gaming system or let them play. But social science and neurodevelopment, persuasion, all of these things, that science is becoming very complex and it's very calculated. And it's just an amazing thing, right? Facebook, as a marketer, we do a lot of marketing on Facebook. Facebook knows within 10 clicks, 10 interactions that you have on Facebook, they can predict your behavior better than your spouse can predict your behavior. Within 100 clicks of Facebook, what you like, what you comment on, that type of thing, 100 interactions, they will predict your behavior better than an individual can predict their own. So the ways that they're learning to develop technology, the reward system, they're tapping into our brain's chemical system as a way to motivate us for screen time. Because if we keep being drawn back to watching Facebook or participating in Facebook, if I'm there, then what's happening is they've got my eyeballs for advertisers. It's much more revenue to have me engaged in Facebook than to have me engaged in real life. Because in real life, they're not advertising anything. There's no money being generated from me when I'm turning my attention from Facebook. All of the platforms have some way built into it. They have a reward system built into it. So with Facebook, if I put up a post and I have a like, there's a feel-good emotion that happens. That's actually a release, a chemical release that's happening in the brain. That's a feel-good emotion, dopamine. And when that happens and I feel good, I'm drawn back for more. And I can almost become addicted to it. And I have to be really careful. Stare into the eyes of the dragon long enough, you become the dragon. And because we're on Facebook all the time serving this community, we really have to be careful of it, because it really it happens, and it happens all too easy. So definitely with our children, if they're playing video games, because video games have reward hits as well, social media, texting, a lot of these different things have rewards built into them that can be very dangerous to us as individuals in the long run. Okay, so hopefully we're going to continue this discussion, because I think it's important. I think the discussion of using the curriculum to fit the needs of your student, we can't say that enough. We use grade ranges, because we believe that a second grade curriculum may be perfect for one second grader, but it may be better for another fourth grader, and it may be good for a first grader. But sometimes people will say, well, the curriculum is so easy. And what we keep saying is the reason that we didn't give, like, okay, math level 1, math lessons for a living education is suited for a first grader. And people will argue and say, no, we use it in kindergarten. Yes, but there are motor skills that need to be developed. There are social skills and cognitive abilities that need to be developed in kindergarten. And so to take that curriculum and just generically apply it to all kindergartners can start to cause frustration. And once that frustration sets in, then you have that routinely for the next 5-10 years. So we encourage you to be very selective and use a lot of wisdom when you're choosing the curriculum. And don't be afraid to pull back. You know, you'll make up. Our best testimony is one of our daughters had struggled and struggled and struggled. And she was delayed in reading. She was delayed with her math. It took forever to get the math facts memorized. And all of a sudden, like about 13 years old, the kid just, boom, takes off and like a rocket, catches everything up, graduates. I mean, she's just like phenomenal. and became like, and on her graduation, there's no doubt her high school years were the absolute best. Her elementary years were the absolute, I think, almost the worst outside of the special needs situation. And yet once it all clicked and it all came together, it all went. And I say that to say that if your kid's in second grade or third grade and they're struggling and you feel like it's just constant battle, well, just be patient with the process. Think of the treadmill, right? Make sure that the treadmill is the right speed and the right height for that student. And then you can build on that. You can build up the speed, you can up the intensity, and determining, how to connect with that student in a way that learns. So hopefully this is helpful. If you're a seasoned homeschool mom and you've been through this process, you've learned some lessons over the years, same thing, we'd encourage you to pipe in. If you see a young mom struggling that is new to homeschooling or maybe is experiencing some of the challenges that we went through, we brought a lot of new babies into the house, and every time we did, well, the kids were excited about it. They had to grieve certain losses, and so that process could be tough, or the loss of a grandparent. All of these things impact our students' mental capacities, and the brain can only handle so much, right? Even for us as adults, doesn't like stress, doesn't like change, doesn't necessarily like growth unless there's a strong motivation for it. And so those are the things that we have to identify. Are those present, and how can we adjust it to fit? All right. Well, we pray the Lord's blessing on your school. We are praying that the Lord will give you wisdom and insight into your students' abilities and skills. We are praying that the Lord will surround you with mentors and individuals who can bless you and encourage you and give you wisdom as well. And we just want you to know that in the good times and in the struggles, you're not alone. Out of 9,000 moms that are part of this group, there are a lot of moms whose houses aren't together. We've oh my goodness, I could tell you the seasons that we've gone through. The houses aren't together. The laundry isn't done. The kids are eating cereal for supper. Whatever. And then there are seasons where it all comes together and it starts to flow and you get victory and it's working. It's completely normal, and that process is normal. And the process of adapting the education to each child is also normal as part of the process. So, all right. So enough of my rant, and I pray that your day is blessed. Remember, it's Frowny Face Free Friday, which means to have a good day. It's Friday. God bless.